Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the implications of a report in yesterday's Sunday Times that Boris Johnson was persuaded to support Brexit largely by Evgeny Lebedev, who's someone who is potentially, on some level, effectively a Kremlin agent, and about whom certainly our intelligence services have had grave misgivings for years. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, although this news has been reported in the Times now, the Sunday Times here, but the Times has been popping as well, a paper read largely by Conservative voters, it's not new. This is very much like when the mainstream media came out with stories of dodgy lobbying jobs for particularly Tory MPs in the wake of the Owen Paterson scandal last year. They weren't anything new. They gained more traction in the media because the public were suddenly interested in them. But if you ever want to see what's happening in the country long before the mainstream media regret covering it up and decide to talk about it, you can do a lot worse than to read the Byline Times or anything by Carol Cadwallader, who often writes for The Guardian or The Observer. But the Sunday Times has now taken up the story, years later. It should be welcomed, of course, because this could have an impact. Let's be honest, the Byline Times and The Guardian and Observer are not really read by people who are thinking of voting Tory. The Times and the Sunday Times have recently been running pieces on Johnson's relationship with Lebedev in particular. The son of a KGB officer and someone who was, well, the KGB officer that is, not his father, not the chap himself, actively working as a spy in Britain during the Cold War. People have tried to say that just because Alexander Lebedev, who's Lebedev Sr., was a Russian KGB spy, doesn't mean that his son is a Putin agent. But this does not really stack up. You know, there's certain amounts of circumstantial evidence. First of all, Evgeny, the man whom Johnson is very close to and was elevated to the House of Lords, is very close to his father. He's not exactly estranged from his father. Secondly, he has often sought to palm blame onto others for Putin's actions. Like, for example, he tried to blame our own intelligence services for one of Putin's murders in this country. And he's publicly praised Putin several times. Third, it's been pointed out that Lebedev could not have access to the levels of wealth that he has without Putin's approval. It is derived entirely from his father, who derived it himself from the Russian government. Fourth, most importantly, because MI6 did not want this man anywhere near British institutions. Our own intelligence services, which have an international reputation for being highly competent, considered Evgeny Lebedev to be a national security risk. They're not saying it's based on any specific thing, oh yes, this man is definitely, wanting to harm our national interest. He's a risk. That means it's not worth the risk to put him in positions of influence. But the focus of this latest article is on a meeting between Boris Johnson, Michael Gove and Evgeny Lebedev, which took place in 2016 and is said to be where Johnson agreed to back Brexit. Now, at this point, I do have to bring in what we already know about Johnson's decision to back Brexit. Before this sudden about-face from the mop-head one, Johnson was always what Tories would call a pragmatic Remainer. He'd made a career from bashing the EU. He was clearly a Eurosceptic. But he would always confidently talk about the UK's need to be part of the EU, madness to leave the single market and our seat at the table. So one of those Tories who maybe doesn't like the idea of the EU, but if the EU is going to be a thing, we should be part of it. Basically, you could think of it in those terms. We also know that he'd been urging a Remain position in his column pieces in early 2016 even. Then at crunch time, he was also known, there's no denial of this, he wrote 2 articles for The Telegraph. One was urging the UK to remain in the EU. The other was arguing for us to leave. And it was like, ooh, which one shall I submit for publication? We also know what swung the decision, not by whom, but what. Boris Johnson wanted to be Prime Minister. It's the whole reason for entering politics. He didn't become an MP to help the country, but he didn't become an MP just to accept dodgy backhanders for lobbying either. He wanted power. Obviously, we now know that he didn't want the power to actually do anything, but he wanted the power anyway. But he was not popular amongst other Conservative MPs. He might still have been able to replace David Cameron when he stepped down. David Cameron had already said that he would step down before the next general election at this point. But Boris Johnson obviously decided that his best chance was to lead the Leave campaign. lose that campaign and become the champion of the Eurosceptics in the Conservative Parliamentary Party without having to deal with all the hassle and the chaos of leaving the EU. All went a little bit wrong when the Leave campaign won, though he has since become Prime Minister, so I suppose he still got what he wanted anyway. But although it's clear that was the motivation for him to suddenly back Leave, because he thought it was the best chance of becoming Prime Minister, it doesn't tell you why he came to that conclusion. Now, obviously, Michael Gove was always considered to be the one who basically persuaded Johnson of this, and he was at this meeting in 2016. But the Sunday Times reporting that Lebedev was trying to shore up support for Brexit. First, by persuading Johnson to get on board with the campaign, also trying to get the editor of the Evening Standard to back it, who apparently refused. Now, I've talked recently about some of the specific concerns that our intelligence services have about Johnson's relationship, particularly with Lebedev, but also others who are potentially within Putin's network of agents, so I won't repeat those again. But there was another interesting snippet, which I don't recall coming across before. I could have forgotten. But it wasn't just that Boris Johnson, on winning the 2019 general election, immediately attended a birthday party for Lebedev Sr., the KGB agent, father of Evgeny. I knew that already. That was reported at the time. It wasn't even that this is when Johnson started pushing for Lebedev Jr. to be given a peerage. I also knew that. It was the report that someone described Johnson's insistence that Lebedev be given the peerage as pathological. That was the word used by this source. Johnson was reportedly not just pushing for this, but pushing for it as if it was not only vital that he get this peerage, but urgent. Why? Ask yourself why Johnson would urgently want Lebedev in the Lords. If this report is accurate, why would he want Lebedev urgently in the Lords? He wouldn't. It doesn't do Johnson any good to want that. That must mean that Lebedev wanted it urgently. Now, consider that Lebedev doesn't actually vote in the Lords. So he's not there to back up the government's legislation. He doesn't even give speeches. He's not there to argue the government's position. So he must have wanted that position for some other purpose. And it's a purpose that doesn't do Boris Johnson any good. And that's what I want to focus on. It's of no benefit to Johnson politically to have a non-voting, non-speaking ally in the House of Lords. Doesn't do him any good at all. So Boris Johnson, personally, didn't really care whether Lebedev got the peerage or not. It doesn't do him any good, doesn't do him any harm. So why did he push officials to make it happen, and with haste? Why was the word pathological used in terms of his insistence that it happen? Logic demands that it must have been Lebedev who urgently wanted this peerage, not Johnson. And the fact that Johnson was pushing it pathologically, as described by this source for the Sunday Times, means two things. First, Johnson is in the thrall of Lebedev. Now, it doesn't matter if you believe this motivation for Johnson is blackmail, bribery, or just being psychologically manipulated. I can think of no other explanation than Lebedev, this man whom MI6 have got serious concerns, has a hold on our Prime Minister. Secondly, that Lebedev wanted some benefit from the peerage and he wanted it quickly, because otherwise why the urgency? He doesn't vote, so trying to swing tight votes can't be it. It can only be access to sensitive documents. Now, yeah, it's been pointed out peers don't normally get access to classified documents, but they can get access to some information not generally available to the general public. But one thing is for certain, this man who is concerning MI6 wanted something and wanted it urgently, and he got it. We know that various checks in the peerage system resisted Lebedev's ennoblement. Dominic Raab, when trying to defend it, said, there's all sort of robust checks in place. There are checks in place. They're not robust. There are checks in place. And all of these checks says, do not make this man appear. But Boris Johnson overruled them all. The report in the Sunday Times said it was unprecedented for a Prime Minister to question intelligence like this. Yet he did. He pushed hard for the objections to disappear. Now, obviously, the outrage that a potential traitor, whether knowingly or not, can be Prime Minister amongst those opposed to Johnson anyway is obvious. It's also largely irrelevant because we weren't going to vote for Boris Johnson or his party anyway. But reporting it in a paper that has a fairly large distribution amongst Conservative voters can have a real impact. Boris Johnson is increasingly being reported in this paper and its sister, The Times, as corrupt, vague, lacking in attention to detail, but also a lawbreaker and now a Russian asset, maybe even a traitor, although we would need proof of clear intent to level that charge. But it is all stacking up. There will be conservatives, moral conservatives, who really don't want to switch to another party, but can they hold their nose and vote for Johnson knowing what they are increasingly being made aware of? It may not cause a change in the party some of these people vote for, though it might, but it may keep them from voting at all, especially when the choice of Prime Minister is between someone who has prosecuted lawbreakers and the corrupt, and someone who's running a criminal cartel and acting as a stooge for an even larger criminal syndicate in another country. And current Tory MPs should also be thinking, I think, very seriously about what they're in politics for. If it involves backing a leader who is clearly a Russian asset as the price for whatever they're in politics for, I think they should ask themselves some very stern questions. I mean, this was known before, really, but the Ukraine war has brought it into clear focus. I do not know if another Conservative leader would make a robust stand against Putin, as those in Europe and North America have done, but I do know that Boris Johnson never will. Putin's hold over him, from whatever source and whatever means, is clearly strong. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, see you later.